Hello, I'm Carey with Devil May Care, and welcome back to another episode of Level 1 Sewing. Today I will finally get to the part that you've been waiting for. The machine. That's right. I'm going to be going over all the different parts and pieces of the machine and what they mean and how to interact with them. To start with, let me just point out that, as you can tell, this is a Singer heavy-duty machine. Not all machines are going to be the same. I will be showing you on this one, but as you compare it to what you're working with, keep in mind that things may be placed a little differently, may be marked a little differently. Just take your time and see what you can find. If you have any specific questions about something on there, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer it. Now, Singer is the company that I prefer to get my machines from, just because I like them, and that's what my mom started me on, so it works. Doesn't mean that's what you absolutely have to use. They're middle of the road as far as price, roughly. Very good machines. The heavy-duty one that I have here is basically all metal parts on the inside, which means it can stand up to extended use and heavier weight fabric and stuff like that. You don't have to have a heavy-duty machine to sew on most projects. Now, there are also companies like Brother that are on the cheaper side, but that doesn't make them bad. They're still very good machines. You can find them mostly at Walmart and Michael's and things like that. They also have some Singers there. You may come across some Elnas or Berninis. Those tend to be a bit higher end, a little more complicated, more advanced, and very, very good machines as well, but they are more expensive and more aggravating. I don't actually have any of those because I'm quite happy with my Singer. Now, let's get to looking at all of these different pieces, shall we? Now then, here, this little button that goes up and down like this, you'll see it says reverse. That is, in fact, the reverse button, or the back stitch button. And what that does, when you press it down, it makes the fabric feed backwards. See, normally it feeds through away from you. Normally, as it goes through, the fabric is moving away, but whenever you press this button, it moves back towards you. Now, these two knobs over here, they deal with some very important things. This one is the length of the stitch. Can you see those little numbers right there that are going around from, what have we got, 1 to 4? That is how long the stitch is. Not all stitches are the same length. If a stitch is, thread goes down through a hole in the fabric and comes back up through another hole in the fabric, the distance between those holes is the length of the stitch, and that's what this controls. This down here is the different types of stitches. You see there's different little squiggly lines on there in different little colors. These are the different kinds of stitches, and see, it turns. Now this one, but this determines the shape of the stitch, whether it's zigzag, whether it's just a straight stitch, whether it's a buttonhole. Let me see, the buttonhole is that one right there. That shape is making a buttonhole. We may cover that in a future episode because buttonholes are their own little nuisance. Okay, this metal piece right here, this is the base plate for the presser foot. This little guy is the presser foot, and it actually will come off, and you can change out your presser foot for different ones depending on the job you want to do. That is actually the presser foot release. When you pull it, it drops the presser foot off. And that is how you can take the presser foot off and change it for a new one. And now you'll see this clear plastic looking thing right here. There's a little black button next to it that opens it up, and that inside is the bobbin right there. This in here is actually the bobbin housing, and not all machines have their bobbin housing on the bottom flat like this. Some of them actually have them turned up sideways, and they have a whole little carriage, a bobbin carriage, that you have to put the bobbin into and slide it into the machine. Those are some of the more complicated machines. I believe most all Brother and Singer machines have a bobbin that loads this way. And that is what your bobbin looks like. Now in this same area, we also have the needle, and we have this little pin screw right here that when you turn it, actually, this is what holds the needle in. When you turn it, you can actually take the needle out and change your needle. There's a lot of very good reasons why you would want to change your needle. Not the least of which being your needle broke. That does happen. If you're using the wrong needle for the fabric that you have, there are different kinds of needles, yes. Know that there are lightweight needles, heavyweight needles. There are ones for things like leather and denim. There are ones for things like satin and chiffon. Generally speaking, they are marked as a heavy-duty needle, a light-duty needle. They have a color code on them and everything. So when you're buying needles, take the time to actually look at the packaging and read what is on them. Now, when you're putting the needle back in the machine, I'm going to try. There's a flat side to the needle. That faces away from you when you put the needle in. When you have that flat piece facing away from you, it just slides right on up in. You can tighten it right back down. Not a problem. Something else you may notice from the side is this little bit sticking out here. That's actually a thread cutter. Not all machines have those. I believe most of the newer ones do now. And that really is, as you pull your piece that you're working on out of the machine, you can just flick it right over that and cut the thread. I almost never use it because I always have a pair of scissors handy, and I use that instead. Now you'll see there's another little button here. This is a really interesting thing that, again, not all machines have, but it's very, very useful. This is actually a needle threader. If you have difficulty threading the needle, as a lot of people do, this comes down and then rotates. See, it comes down and rotates, and there's actually a little wire on the end of it that pokes through the eye of the needle. You then place your thread in that little piece of wire and release, and now your needle is magically threaded. That's also something I rarely use because I'm not too bad at threading a needle, if I do say so myself. Now, moving around to the back of the machine, we have this button right here which lowers and raises the presser foot. This is how you can get fabric up underneath it and then lower it down to actually sew it, and then raise it back up again to pull it back out. It's important to have that presser foot down when you're sewing because there are little teeth. There are little teeth that line up with the bottom of the presser foot, and these move. When you sew, they move. They come up, grab, move back, and lower. Move forward, come up and grab, move back. And that is how it pulls the fabric through the machine. And the only way that they will be able to work properly is if you have your presser foot down, holding the fabric, pressing the fabric to those teeth, to those moving teeth. Now, looking down at the top of the machine, the first thing you may notice is the spool of thread. Yep, this is where the thread goes. Now, not all machines have a sideways spool like that. Some of them do actually have the stop standing up on top. That right here is what this is for. This machine actually has an extra attachment. You can put a stop there and set your thread like that. That's just up to you. This one, I guess, is trying to be a little more compact. This piece right here is specifically meant to do exactly what it does there. It slides on the end, and that stops the thread from pulling off of the thread holder, the stop. I just call it a stop, as it's sewing. Now you see these little metal bits, these are all tensioners, and the thread has to go through all of these before it goes through the needle, and I will show you how to thread a machine. Bear in mind, these are going to be a little bit different, as I said earlier, on all machines. Every machine's a little different, so you just have to be patient, take some time, and look at it. If you'll notice, if you'll look really closely, you see there are markings. This has a 1 with an arrow going through. That's telling you that that's how the thread has to go through, and it has to go through first. This one has a 2. This one is 5 because you actually have to go down the front for 3 and 4. So the machine will tell you whether it's markings like this on top or whether it actually has a little pull-out piece, a flip-out opening on the side with instructions in it. All machines will tell you somewhere how to thread them. You just have to know where to look. Now these here, all these little knobs, these deal with things as well. This one over here, you see it says tension. That determines how tight or loose these different tensioners actually hold the thread to make those right. This one here, see needle position. There are actually 3 different positions that the needle can have in relationship to its base. It can be in the very center, it can be all the way to the left or all the way to the right. That's what this controls. It clicks to the left, that is center, and that is right. On the front, it actually has pictures. It actually has pictures denoting that on the front of this little wheel. This one right here, as you can see, is width. That controls the width of the stitch if you're doing a zigzag. That's a side-to-side stitch as opposed to just a straight forward stitch. And you can have the width of that can be very, very wide or very, very narrow, depending on what you want. And this is where that is controlled. Again, all of these mechanisms, these controls, may be in different places on your machine. Things to look for are this little symbol right here. Not all of them, not all of the stitch widths will actually have width next to it. They may have this funny little progressively widening squiggle. That indicates stitch width. The needle position may actually have a line or a series of lines with a perpendicular line over them at different points. That's needle position. All of this should be explained in the owner's manual if you have it. So really take the time and get to know your machine, because they are not all the same. Now, one more little shiny thing to go over is this little guy right here. And this is actually the bobbin winder. And yeah, these I just dropped it. These little bobbins, they do not come preloaded with thread. Well, some of them do, but not all of them do. You have to load them with the thread yourself, and the thread that's on the bobbin comes off of this spool. You redirect the thread, starting here, through all of this. You put your bobbin on there and slide it over like that. And then when you hit the pedal, now instead of stitching, it will actually wind your bobbin, and you just let it run until it's full of thread. Simple, easy, right? Isn't that awesome? The reason that this knob moves sideways like that is because it disengages the needle. And the reason that I'm telling you that is because not all machines have that same kind of mechanism to disengage the needle. For some of them, it's actually on the side. Can you see this little wheel right here? For some of them, there's a button or a switch on the side in that wheel that will disengage the needle. And what that does is when you're actually winding the bobbin, the needle won't move up and down and try to sew. Another part of the machine is the bit that you never actually see me working with. It's this right here. That is the foot pedal. It's very simple, very straightforward, and if you watch, it presses down like this. See? That's basically the accelerator. This is the go button. This right here is how you power the machine. And yes, it works exactly the same way as an accelerator. You push it down a little bit, it'll go slow. You push it down a lot, it'll go really, really fast. Some machines actually have a speed control on them where no matter how far down you press it, it will only go slow. Or no matter how lightly you press it, it will go really, really fast. One last little cool thing that I want to show you about the machine is how it comes apart. Ta-da! All machines have this ability. They may not have one solid piece that comes out like this. They may have a front piece and a back piece that comes off, but all of them have some piece somehow that will remove to make this part narrower, and that is specifically for doing things like cuffs on sleeves, because a sleeve is a very narrow tube that you have to get up onto this thing so that you can sew like these little lines of top stitching. There's no way that you could necessarily do that with this big, huge base to work on. So that comes off, and then not only is this narrow, but it actually goes all the way underneath. It is not touching the table at all. So you can have fabric wrapped all the way around this, and it will continually move around it completely unimpeded. Now then, as I said, threading the needle. First thing is through here, then we come through here, then we come down the front, under here, back up, and this little bit is tricky because you actually have to turn the knob, this wheel on the side. What this controls is the up and down motion of the needle. See there? There is another element. As you are moving the needle up and down, this little arm pops up. See? Once you have that, you bring the thread up and through that. And I really am just sort of draping the thread through all of these things. They are all built on virtually all machines you're going to be dealing with. All of these different tensioners are made so that you can just slide the thread through them from one angle or another. You don't actually have to thread each and every one of them. Now, once we get down here, we have this little piece that we need to slide it through, and I'm just going to slide it around like that, and it catches itself. See? The thread has come through there all on its own. And then the needle also has a guide right there at the top of it, and we will slide it through exactly the same way. She says here in fine print. There we go. Those are all threaded. Now, I will try to use the needle threader, which means the needle has to be all the way at the top. Needle threader comes down and pushes through, and you just slide the thread, into the little piece of wire that has pushed through the hole, and then release. And can you see the loop of thread, hopefully, that is created? Now you just pull that on through, and the needle is magically threaded. Wow, I had a long tail of thread. There we go. Now, we are not yet done. That's right, we still have our bobbin to worry about. Now, the top plate of our bobbin casing, our bobbin housing, is very, very helpful. You see the shape? I'm trying to put it so that you can kind of see it. That actually shows you the direction that the bobbin needs to go in. There's the bobbin itself, and then this little line coming off with the arrow, that's the direction that the thread actually needs to go through the housing. Now, some machines have it on the cover like that. Some of them have it printed kind of to the side. Again, every machine is going to tell you how it needs to be threaded. It will explain it. And that little move I just made is all the more difficult. It really is. There's a little groove in there that when you put the bobbin in, you just slide the thread around, you just wiggle it around, it'll catch that groove. And then there's a snazzy little trick you can do to finish threading it. Remember the little wheel that we have on the side? You turn that to move the needle, and the needle will go down, and it will actually, you can watch it when you're doing it, the thread will move around the bobbin in its casing, and then all you have to do is pull the thread, the needle thread, and that will raise the bobbin thread, a little loop of it, up through that center hole, and you can catch it with something, and then pull it right on through. And now, our machine is threaded and ready to go. Yay! A really good thing to do before you actually start sewing with the machine for the first time is practice. And a great way to practice, the way my mom first had me practicing when I started, is with a simple sheet of lined notebook paper. Now, when it comes to sewing, actually sewing a line of stitching, there is a little trick I want to show you about this base plate. You see these lines, all of these lines on the base plate, those actually mark specific intervals from the needle. When the needle is centered, you saw how the needle moved just then, how it jumped back and forth. I'm actually moving the needle position knob to do that. That's how that works. Now, when the needle is centered, each of these lines marks an interval, an increment of distance from the needle itself. And it tells you what they are across up here. I don't know if you can see that. But that is one way you can maintain a straight line. So we've got our lined notebook paper. And you can, if you imagine that this is even a piece of fabric, line the edge up with one of these grooves and simply maintain that as you sew. That one right there is 5/8. And there will be different patterns will tell you take this much seam allowance, that much seam allowance. This is one way to help mark that. And as you move the fabric, or in this case paper, keep that edge lined up with that groove. And then when it's, see, it's slipping off. It's not as easy as you might think sewing on a piece of paper. But then you will have a relatively straight line. That's not the most impressive. Don't tell my mom. And then see, here, scissors to cut with. Actually, no, how about I show you? The little thread cutter that I mentioned earlier. You just loop it over and pull. Ta-da! Threads are cut. That's how that works. Once you have mastered the lined paper technique, another good thing to start working on is manipulating it around curved lines, because you're going to have those. No body is all straight lines. A great way to practice with this is with coloring book pages. This right here is actually a copy of one of T.S.'s little sad dragons. Shh, don't tell her. I feel that I should mention, just in case anyone out there is really, really in love with these little dragons because they're adorable, you can actually find T.S. Tyer's work up on redbubble.com. Don't worry, I'll include a link. So what you want to do is make sure that your needle is lined up with any given one of these dark lines, and you can use the wheel on the side to make sure, see, there we are, good and lined up. And then take it very, very slowly. And remember to keep both hands on the fabric or paper. And be careful, because it will try to get fast with you. This also will help you get used to the feel of that pedal. And you hear how it just sits there for a moment? That's because I have my foot ever so lightly on the pedal. But it's not quite hard enough to actually go. Now let me show you what this button does. Let's see, can I? This reverse button up here. Okay, can we get both in there? Now when you push this down, you've seen the way that it's been feeding through. When you push this button down, it will go backwards. And what I just did was I backstitched over a line of stitching. That will finish that line of stitching and help prevent it from pulling out. Thank you again for joining me for another episode. I've heard from a few of you that this series is proving very helpful, and I can't tell you how happy I am to hear that. I'm going to keep it going, of course, and doing everything I can to help wind you through the introduction to this complicated business of sewing. It's really not that bad once you get to know it. And if you have any questions on anything I've already done, anything you would like to see me explain at any point, please leave me a comment. Get in touch with us on this video or any others like it, or you can let me know through our Facebook page, Devil May Care Cosplay. And I mentioned earlier about TS Tire's artwork being available on Redbubble. There's other stuff available on Redbubble too, specifically Devil May Care merchandise. Check that out. We've got t-shirts, mugs, phone cases, all sorts of awesome stuff, all featuring Jonathan Thompson, the devil himself, Dennis Walls, Captain Who, and the lovely Dana Verhey, Lady Vermin. So go check that out and maybe buy something. Every way that you support us keeps it going strong. And of course, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know that you enjoy what we're doing. And I'll see you next time.